So let's say that you're mailing a letter at the post office and you're sending it off to a city in Corinth, Greece. Corinth is a city in central Greece, which is in a European country east of Italy. And this is what Paul did. So this is one of his epistles, which is a letter to a church that became a book in the New Testament. This is about 53 years after Christ's birth. And he talks to them in this particular letter. He addresses that this church happens to be quite immature. And so he says that things of God is foolishness to a carnal man, and you guys kind of behave like carnal babes, and so I'm going to have to like feed you milk here. And but he says it lovingly, and it takes his long time writing this long letter about some things he want to address with them in order for them to succeed. And he's kind of saying that just like we raise our children up till they're 18 and say, you can do this, you cannot do this, you can eat this, be home this time, you're going to get punished if you do this, you're not allowed. But then when they're 18, we kind of expect them to be able to use what they learned from the consequences of their actions to see what is good and what is living responsibly, taking care of themselves, taking care of others, and be kind to other human beings. And so it's kind of like this in the Bible, that the old law that was everything that they were supposed to do has now kind of been fulfilled with love. So now we're to be really filled with love in our heart by the love we got from Christ and be able to act accordingly. And that would lead to really, if you have perfect love, you have perfect behavior. But he sees a lot of imperfect behavior that he's addressing. And one of them is sexual immorality. He says this is the worst because everything else that you do, that you sin, it's outside of your body, but sexual immorality is inside your body, and your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. So he says it's of great concern. He says flee sexual immorality completely. And people that still live selfishly and immature, like with sexual immorality or other drunkardness and such, they're not going to inherit the kingdom of God. Don't even hang out with them. Evil company corrupts good character. And if you're doing any of those things and hanging out with your brothers and sisters, you can cause them to stumble. So immature behavior. He also addresses divorce, which is a big topic. Chapter 7, he says, a wife is not to depart from her husband. If she does, she's to remain unmarried or reconciled to her husband. Husband is not to divorce a wife. If a person doesn't demonstrate faith, is not a walking Christian in the faith, but they're willing to stay with you, remain with them. They may be saved through observing and being around you and your Christian conduct. But if the spouse who lacks faith leaves you, divorces you, then you're not under bondage, but peace. He also addresses communion. Communion is not for the immature. It says to examine your heart, that you are not unworthy in your ways before you partake of communion. He talks about that there's division in the church. He says you need to be perfectly joined together in the same mind and not have division. So with these things, he says, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. Let all that you do be done with love. And the famous passage, also 1 Corinthians chapter 13 about love, saying you can't be a Christian by knowledge or even serving if you lack love towards your brothers, your sisters, your neighbor, and even your enemy. Without love, he says, you're sounding brass, clanging cymbal. You are nothing, and nothing that you do for Christ profits you anything. But love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, and bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and love never fails. And I just think that Paul was an example himself in this letter to this church of being all those things that he talks about. He didn't judge them. He didn't say, we're going to get you in trouble, or he didn't say, you're not going to allow to be there anymore. We're going to get a new management. He suffered long with them. He was kind. He didn't puff up himself or was rude. He didn't think evil. He believed all things. endured all things and continued to encourage them and teach them what they need to do in their ways to succeed. So I think he demonstrated that well himself.